everyone. Welcome to Breakthrough Conversations. My name is Danielle Perry, and I am the host. You already know I am so excited that you're tuned in for another episode of this podcast. And if this is your first time on this podcast, it features people of all ages, and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge, situation, or a season in their lives, or maybe they're on their way to overcoming with God's help. Well, y'all, I'm excited again, as always, because this episode I believe is truly going to bless you. And this is part 1 of episode 27, and it features a dear friend of mine, Miss Stephenie Beatty. And the title of this episode is Raising My Nephews as a Single Mom. Stephenie, thanks again for sharing just a bit of your story on this podcast. I know that it's going to encourage others that are maybe in your shoes and just others in general. And for those of you who don't know, because I always got to let y'all know how I know the guests that come across this podcast, but I've known Stephenie since she joined the same church that I attend about 5 or 6 years ago. And we've just built a friendship, a relationship over the years where we can just encourage one another and pray with and for one another. And Stephenie is a very powerful woman of God. Just as I continue to have conversations with her, I'm hearing her and the revelations that God gives her and just how she speaks about the word. And a lot of what she says is very profound. And I know that God has so much in store for her, that what she's seen as far as how God can use her is only a glimpse of what God wants to do through her. And I know that she has a major calling on her life. And so, Stephenie, just be encouraged and continue to walk as a powerful woman of God, because that is who you are, a powerful woman of God. And I can't wait to see how God is going to continue to use you. So, y'all, without further ado, here it is, part 1. Enjoy and be blessed. She's none other than Miss Stephenie Beatty. Hey! Did I say your last name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, good.
A lot of people don't, but you did awesome.
Awesome. How are you today?
I'm blessed.
Yes.
Like every other day.
Yes.
So tell a little bit about myself.
Yes, please.
All right, I'm Stephenie Beatty. I am 37. I am the mom. I'm 36. I'm already trying to
add a year
right.
on.
I'm the mama of 2 boys. Daughter of, mom and dad. All 7 kids are same parent. That's pretty much.
That's pretty much it. Okay. Cool. And we'll get to know you more as you share a bit of what we're going to be talking about today. And the title of today's episode is Raising Your Nephews as a Single Mother. Right?
Yes.
So this is going to be I'm sure a very profound conversation, if I can say it that way. And I know that you're going to share some things that maybe you've never shared before. The Holy Spirit, whatever he leads you to say, right?
Yeah.
So we are going to just jump right into the questions. I want you to first just talk about how was your life as a young girl? Who was Stephenie as a young girl?
Stephenie spent a lot of her time by herself.
Okay.
We didn't grow up in a well-kept home, so it was a bit dysfunctional. And I didn't always know how to deal with it or to act, so I generally would hide myself in movies or TV shows or even books. So it's where I gained my love of reading, because I can be anybody, anywhere, at any time in a book.
In a book, okay. So
sometimes it would get a little hard, though. It would get a little hard to disappear in a book. It would get a little hard to disappear in a movie. So God literally himself would come and he would put me in a dream state, I say. The soonest I can remember was maybe at 5, when he had me in, it was a place, it was full of grass, it was trees in the distance, no buildings. The sunshine was there. I was riding on a horse, and I remember feeling free. No pain, no anguish, not sad. I just felt utterly free. But he told me I couldn't stay there. So I had to come back to this world, I guess.
At 5. You remember that?
Okay.
Wow.
Where it pertains to, I have 6 siblings, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. I'm the youngest of the girls. I'm the 4th. We've always been close. We would even sit in the house bored, make up songs.
Okay.
So when you got nothing to do, well, let's make up a song.
Right.
Or some crazy games. that grew a little bit too far when we was older.
Okay.
So, like, we would start with little things, like we would throw these little gumdrops at each other. But then when they migrated to butterscotches, we like, hold on, y'all doing too much.
Right.
Y'all going too far.
We gotta stick with the soft candy.
Those is not. And it got, I would like to say it stopped at the butterscotches, but no, as we got older, it was like, we ain't a part of this no more, because y'all getting dangerous.
Right, right.
And school-wise, I was pretty much quiet.
Okay.
But a part of the dysfunction of growing up, it left me with a bit of scars of who I am. So sometimes I would try to find myself in shows, like in characters of shows. If I'm watching a show and I like what this character does, I'm like, oh, I like that. Let me try that. Or if I'm watching this movie and the person in it is super kind and sweet, I'm like, oh, I've always wanted to be kind and sweet, so let me try that. So it kind of gave me an identity issue that transpired from childhood on up to adulthood. So.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that more. So did you grow up in church?
We did. We were faithfully in church. My father played the piano in church, so we were faithfully in there. And then it wasn't just faithfully. My father was one of them people where if he playing the piano, he wants to sing, oh, he gonna call, we choir. Call all of us, come on up here and sing. And we like, oh man,
all seven of y'all.
All seven.
Okay.
He would pull us up there and start singing, and we'd be all like, wow, not today. So like Lucy, my older sister, she would love to sing, but I kind of love to sing, but it's like, I don't like being front and center.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I sing, but I'm going to sing from behind everybody else. So like, put me back there, and I just carry something from the back. But yes, we grew up in church, but even in growing up in church, there was a lot of church hurt.
Okay.
When I was younger, I remember seeing a pastor, and he was speaking, and he had this glow in his eyes. So I'm like, okay, what is this? So I'm looking around the church to see if it's from the light, it's coming from outside. I could not find a source of the light, and I still didn't pinpoint where is this coming from.
Okay.
So it intrigued me to want to go to church.
Right.
As well as there was this lady who, she would always get up when praise and worship started, and she'd be screaming and running around the church and praising, and I didn't understand it, but I was like, she crazy or something. Like, I want to go to church to see the crazy lady. Like, I gotta go to
Hilarious.
that. So it's like found little things like that made me want to go to church because I never really understood what the preacher was saying. I didn't understand it, but I'm like, okay, so this guy got a glow in his eyes that's coming from nowhere. And then this lady, she gonna do something crazy today. I gotta go to church to see this. See if she gonna get a lap run. How long she gonna go this time before she fall?
Right.
Yes. So I found things that made me excited about going.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now I'm curious to know: Did you ever find out what that glow was in his eyes?
Not as a child. No,
not as a child.
More to an adulthood when I started to read or started to learn more about God and how through the eyes is the soul. So the light in his eyes literally was coming from the Spirit of God in him. But I didn't understand that. Nor did I understand why I was the only person that saw it. Nobody else, I would ask my siblings, like, did you see it? Nobody else saw it besides me. And still to this day, I don't understand why. Nobody else saw it but me.
Wow. I think sometimes God allows things like that to happen. Of course, in his sovereignty and in his infinite wisdom, he knows what things will draw us to him. So for you, maybe that was sort of a reference point for when you got older. You can remember that there was something in that man's eyes. I need to know, God, what was that? You know, because sometimes God would allow us to be curious so that we can come to him. You know, so maybe that's why you were the only one. And of course, he knows why, right?
Right.
So growing up in church, did that help you to have a strong foundation in the Lord?
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
Mainly because church hurt came from the church people of the church. Their disdain for our father, it reached out to us as well, and my mother. So not understanding why they treated us so badly And then my father was one way in church and then another thing at home. So it gave me this understanding about, you guys are talking about this good God and y'all saying that you love him, but there is a lot of evil in the church and at home. So it was like not too much peace. So it didn't really build the foundation people-wise. But however, God would always reach out to me. So whether it had been in dreams or even when I was around 6 or 7 years old and we were at home and my father had music on and he had us dancing, and he told us to lift our hands while we were singing and dancing. And I remember starting to cry. Not really understanding why, but knowing that I felt something and I began to cry. So even though I didn't have the foundation laid for me too much, because my dad did teach us about Christ.
Okay.
He told us about Christ. He had us every Wednesday doing Bible study. So he did teach us. And Christ, he, like the word says, he planted the seed. Another watered, and God gave the increase. And God's grace was with us. One thing that he definitely made me know personally, that I wasn't alone. So like he would give me dreams, even dreams of the word, and I didn't realize until reading it later that that dream was literally the word of God.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. And Lucille was on the podcast as well as Ayana. And you all have just a similar just part of your story, each of you, when it comes to God speaking to you in ways that are very prophetic, right? And I know Ayana shared how, she heard God or saw God when she was a toddler as well. So it's evident how the prophetic it just flows in your family. And just how much God loves y'all.
Yes.
It's so evident.
It's awesome.
It's so evident. So you talked about your school years and how you were quiet, reserved, shy. And would you say that was still because of just a lot of what was going on at home and that sort of thing?
Stuff at home, identity, not really finding a place or fitting in. To the point where I even asked God. And that's another thing. Growing up, I knew that I could ask God things. So I asked him. I think I was a teenager when I asked him because I wanted to hang. I had this small group of friends, and they went places, they did things. So I wanted to go. I'm a teenager. I want to go out.
Yeah.
But whenever I tried to, there would be something that stops it. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like, oh my goodness, I really want to go out with it. So I asked God, I'm like, God, how come every time I try to go out, I can't go? And then not feeling like I fit in was a big issue, especially as, a middle school kid, you want to fit in.
Absolutely.
And you don't. Like, no matter how much you try to be different or like the group, you never fit in. So I asked him, I said, God, why can't I just fit in? Why can't I just be like everybody else? Why can't I just be the way they are? And he said to me, he said, you will never fit in because I created you to stand out. And I remember him telling me that, and I felt okay, but it was like a sad okay, like, okay.
Right. Who wants
Like,
to hear
here
that
we
as
go.
a middle schooler?
Like, here we go. Like, but I respected it and I took it to heart. And he said, I'm not going to fit in. So now at this point, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to go through this, knowing that I'm not going to fit in. So I can say it was tough. I spent a lot of the time by myself or not even being myself, not even showing anybody truly who Stephenie was because I felt like they wouldn't accept Stephenie, especially because God told me that I'm going to stand out. So at this point, I have to be what everybody else want me to be. Right. Because if I show them Stephenie, they're not going to accept her.
Yeah.
But even in that, even in trying to be somebody else, God was still there. Like I remember in 7th grade where we were sitting at this table and we were playing Truth or Dare. And everybody think truth is weak, so we can't.
Right.
Nobody wants to pick truth.
Right.
But my truth, I didn't want to pick truth because my best friend knew that I had a crush on a boy there.
Okay.
So if I picked truth, she was going to say, is it true that you like so-and-so? And I was like, I'm not picking truth.
Right.
So I picked dare.
Okay.
There was this young lady that everybody picked on at school. So they dared me to tell her that her socks was ugly. She wore the little designer crazy socks before it was a thing.
Okay.
So they dared me to go tell her that her socks was ugly. So I'm like, okay, because there's like 9 of us playing, and I'm not getting punched by 9 people. So I get up and I go to walk to her, and she's literally across the cafeteria.
Okay.
So I get up and I walk over there, and in the middle of the cafeteria, God stops me. And he says to me, you know that you are wrong. And I stopped because I knew who it was. I knew it was God talking to me. And now I'm like, oh, shoot. So am I going to get in trouble by God, or am I going to let 9 people punch me? So I thought for a second, and then I kept walking. And then I walked over there, and I said to her, hi, my name is Stephenie. Who are you? She told me her name, and I said, it's nice to meet you. And I walked back over there, and I got punched by 9 people.
Wow.
But I would rather get punched by 9 people than to get punched by God.
Wow. That's good. That's good. And how old were you again?
I was in 7th grade. I was about
grade.
13, 14.
Wow. Wow. You know, I wonder how many children actually hear God like you do, or like you did, but didn't heed his voice. Because I know you weren't the only one at your school who could hear God like that. And I really do feel like there are more young people out there who have a similar story. They just don't know how to be who they are. You know what I mean? I don't know why that just came to me, but I really do feel like God speaks to other young people similar to how he spoke to you. But wow, I love that. Rather get punched by, you said how many people? 9 people than punched by God. Yeah. I know that's right. That's good. That's good. So I want to talk about the relationship that you eventually got into. At what age? And just talk about how that all started.
Oh. The relationship, the last one, it was odd about how I got into it, because he was actually a friend to my sister's boyfriend. Okay. And he was trying to talk to me while I had a boyfriend, and I'm like, no, I'm not that type of person where I am in a relationship. So I ignored him. You know, I already told him no. He was persistent, but I was still, no, that's not who I am. So after me and the boyfriend that I had at the time had broke up, and maybe a year or so went by, and I had moved back from Pennsylvania to Baltimore, he tried again. Okay. And this time I'm like, well, you know, we are cool, maybe try, because we have been friends, so maybe try the relationship off the friendship. Okay. And it was a mess. We never actually got into complete relationship either. So, like, it bothered me a lot, because it's like, you went through all this time trying to get with me, and then you get me, and you break me. Why? When you could have just left me alone. So.
How old were you?
Then I was like 19,
okay.
20.
19 or 20. Okay.
So it was like, it was hurt there, because it's like, you literally just got with me to hurt me. So I think from that relationship, I had decided that I wasn't going to be in any relationships anymore. That whatever comes next, it's going to be at a distance. So like, if we talking to each other, that's all we're going to do. It's not no feelings or anything involved. So it's like, I built a wall in that moment, and decided that, you know, whatever is coming next, I'm already planning for it to be over. I'm not putting my heart into it. Right. It's just going to be what it is.
Yeah. So your heart was locked down, pretty much. So that relationship happened, and how long were you in the relationship?
It's odd because it was on and off.
Okay.
It was on and off for a couple years, I believe. Yes, it was some years on and off. But then it was like we didn't even call each other ourselves in a relationship. We were just talking, I guess. That's what we was calling it.
Okay. So that relationship ends, your heart is broken. And you said that, I want to say shortly after your mom had gotten custody of your nephews,
Yes.
right? And she asked you to help out. So talk about just where you were mentally, spiritually, because again, you're in a state of just, having a broken heart. And then your mom asks you to help out with the boys. So talk about that.
I was everywhere. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. At this point, I'm 23. So it's like time's dwindling down. I already feel like I'm like 90. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I had took up some bad habits. I had took up drinking. I had took up smoking. I had decided that I was going to do something else, like the Air Force or be a stewardess on a plane. I just had to get away. So I had signed up for the Air Force, but then they had a couple of things they told me I had to do before I could even really apply to even go.
Okay.
Like they were saying something about my weight and the fact that I smoked. And then the stewardess thing. It's funny that I signed up for that and the Air Force when I have a problem with heights. But we're not going to get into that. The two things that I signed up for, and I'm afraid of heights is crazy. But during that time, the issue with my nephews started. And when a judge had finally decided after court date that they were going to give them to my mother, when we were at court, they kind of had a little break, a miniature break. And my mom had pulled me to the side and she said to me, she raised hers. And if she had to do this all over again, because they were infants, she said she can't do it if she don't have the help. And I wasn't going to see them in foster care. That was not an option. So I told her, yes, I will help. If you get them, I'll help you.
Yeah.
So I made that decision, not just with my mouth, but with my heart, that this is what I'm going to do. 23 years old and ended up with 2 boys.
Wow.
But it was not, there was no regret. It was the options, help her or have them in foster care. That's not an option for me.
Right.
It's help her, period.
Yeah. Wow. And you also said that you prayed to God before your mom asked you. And what was your prayer and what did God say?
I prayed to God. It was during the time that I was hurting over my relationship. And I had asked God, I said, God, I told him I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the same things, messing with the same guys, the same cycle. And I said, I just want a guy who can love me unconditionally and who I could love unconditionally. But I wasn't specific. I was not specific. And he gave me the answer to my prayer. And the way I said it, but not what I meant on the inside.
Right.
So it's like he's saying, I heard what you asked for. I gave you what you asked for. You didn't tell me specifically what you want, but I gave you what you needed. So it was like, oh my goodness. It was like, okay.
Yeah. And God does that. He has a funny way of answering our prayers, especially when we're not specific.
Right.
So you're 23 and they were, how far in age are they apart again?
A month and 2 days apart. Because Andrew's birthday, he turned 1. He was born in 2009. He turned 1 in 2010, December. And Frederick was born 2011 in January.
Okay, so a year.
I'm sorry, a year, a month, and 2 days.
Okay. So like you said, they were babies pretty much at that time. And just talk about how when they got older, you said that they were calling you mom pretty much, you know, and at some point you told them the story about, you know, how you are their aunt, you're not their mom, but they still called you mom because that's who you were to them, right? So talk about that. And how old were they when you talked to them about
at
you
that
being their
point?
aunt?
I believe that Frederick was 1, and Andrew was around 2 years old.
Okay.
And I didn't want to be like I was insulting their mother or my brother. So I would tell them, you know, I felt like, because they're running around there calling me mommy. So me and even Lucy would tell them, you know, that's on Stephenie, I'm on Stephenie. And they just kept saying, mommy, mommy, mommy. So I think Lucy accepted it before I did. She like, that is who they see you as. You know, they see you as mommy. And I'm still like, Aunt Stephenie. And at some point, I just gave in. You know, this is who they see me as. And I guess it even tied us a little bit more because when I was 18, I got sick and I had to go to the hospital. And the doctors told me that if not impossible, it would be hard for me to have children. So, and hearing that, and then I got these 2 little boys running around calling me mommy. So, like, it hit me a little stronger and maybe even made the bond a little greater because at this point, I was told that I'm not going to be a mother or it's going to be hard to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And then I have 2 little boys calling me mommy.
Right.
So, it's like, in an instant, like, I'm mommy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it definitely hit a bit different.
Okay. So, as they're growing older, just talk about what was it like at home? How did you just raise them, you know, as their aunt, but them seeing you as their mom? Just talk about some of the challenges that you faced early on.
It was definitely a struggle. Some days I felt like I was getting hit all around from my brother, my mother, their biological mother. And then sometimes it also felt like where court came in, it felt like I didn't have a voice. Like everybody and the judge would sit there and they would decide what is best for them. But me being the one that's with them, that's there for the sickness and the schools, and I'm there for everything, but I have to sit in the background and not speak. So I would be one of the ones that know what is best because I know them.
Right.
Yeah, I can't even voice it because the judge chose their mother, their father, and my mother to speak, and none of them. And then it's like it's a battle between them, and I have to sit there and watch. So it was definitely a struggle having to accept certain things, not being able to speak up. Then there was also the torment of knowing that someday that they're going to truly start to understand what is going on. And they're going to start lashing out, especially because it's not just them. So they have 4 brothers on their mother's side, and they have 2 sisters and 2 brothers on their father's side. So there's, you know, other children that are still with their parents and they are not. So I knew that was going to be a struggle, as well as them not seeing my brother as much, you know, him not fluently being active in their lives. And they weren't really seeing their biological mother that much either. And then them finding their own. So it was a struggle, but there were so many good times too. They had me tired though. They ganged up on me. I would call them day and night because Andrew, his behind would be up all night, like laughing and googling. I'm like, Andrew, go to sleep.
Right.
Like he's sitting there, he would take Iona little ballies and tie it around his foot and be like, look, Ma.
Okay.
And then I'm like, oh my goodness. And Frederick is knocked out at this point. So then I finally get Andrew down. I'm like, yes. And then Frederick wake up like, good morning. I'm like, no. So it was like a little gang up, but then my mother, she'll come home and she had like this magic touch or something because she would put them right back to sleep. And I'd be sitting there like, wow.
Right.
Wow. Okay, let me get some sleep while I can. So like it was a struggle, but then it was so many good times. And then there were times where, you know, I'm and my feelings, because I'm consistently reminded they are not your children. Whenever their mom and I get into a little argument, or my brother and I get into a disagreement, or they would always throw, oh, I'm going to take my kids, or we're going to go to court, and it hurt. It hurt so bad that I would get so angry, and sometimes I cut them off. Other times I'll say not so nice things out my mouth. But it hit really hard, just the thought of them being taken away. So it was definitely a struggle to have to sit in the background and be quiet, to think about them just one day coming and just taking them. And even thinking that one day, this is going to hurt them. The whole setup, the whole situation. So with the greater struggle, sometimes, just like when I was a kid, when all the chaos come, I have to get something to just get it out of my head, because it weighs so heavy. So even then, I would cling to stuff like the TV shows, the books, but at that age, it was a little bit more. I stayed away from the smoke. Not cigarettes. I unfortunately was still doing cigarettes, but it wasn't helping. Nothing was helping. And then God was in the mix too. Because one day I was so frustrated and I was so angry. And I had another spat with their mom and my brother. And sometimes my mom would be on my side, other times she wouldn't be. So it's like everybody is against me. So I'm just everywhere, and I just want to be done. And then God said something to me. Then I was like, wait a minute, God, you too? Because he said to me, Stephenie, you can't be selfish with them. And I'm sitting there like, you too? Hold up. But then knowing that God does everything for everybody, he's not a respecter of person.
Right.
So I'm like, shoot, what did I do now? Because he said,
so was it like
selfish.
you were holding them so close to you that you didn't want them to necessarily spend a lot of time with other people? Was that what it was?
I felt like maybe I was feeling like I was protecting them from the craziness, because there was so much chaos. So I felt like maybe, if I hold tighter, maybe they won't notice the chaos. They won't be a part of the chaos. But in thinking that, God had to tell me, you can't be selfish with them. So I wasn't aware that I was holding on to them a little too tight, where God needed to tell me that. And it was more than just that, because there was one time that I had got into it again with their biological mom that I was so fed up. I was so done. And I talked to Lucy. Lucy talked to me. She, she prayed with me, but I was still just so done, and I was so angry. And then God told me to read the story of Paul. So I read Paul, and how, he on the road, how he was crucifying the Christians, and on the road to Damascus, he was knocked off the horse, and God reached out to him. And I was like, okay, I read it, Lord. And he said, okay, read it again. So I read it again, and I'm like, okay, Lord, I read it again. And he said, you're not ready yet, read it again. And I'm like, by the fourth time, I'm like, I read it. He like, read it again.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm reading it, and this time it's reading a little different. And I'm like, And then he said to me, just like Paul, he said, do not hate her, because I can turn anybody around to do my will. So, like, by the fifth time, it took me 5 times to get to what he was saying.
It's like that sometimes.
It took me 5 times, but I got there. But he was telling me, I didn't even realize I was getting to the point of hate. But he told me, don't hate her. Because just like I did with Paul, I can turn her around too, to do my will. So then I'm like, ugh. I gotta breathe. Like, really? Like having a little temper tantrum, like, but God. And he like, And I'm like, just keep me humble. Just keep me humble.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. But when you think about just the fact that God chooses to speak to us, it's like God had you not spoken to me, who knows where my heart, where my mind would have been towards this person. Now, throughout you raising them, right, were you stable in a church home?
I was not. I went different places trying to find something. I didn't know exactly what I was searching for at first. Wasn't seeking God like I needed to. I didn't want to focus on the things that was happening around me. I didn't want to focus on the issue, and I knew if I went to God, my mind would be open up to what is happening around me, and I didn't want that. I just wanted it to be gone, or rather be in my own little world, own little space. So though we did go to church throughout, like they were baptized,
Okay.
and we went to different churches, but not a steady one. And then some of the churches, I felt like it wasn't where we were supposed to be. So it was a bit much during those times. But God, just as always, He showed up, whether it was in dreams or talking. Like even when we were staying with my mom and her husband, there was a church that was right beside us. We could clearly go over there, but we didn't. My nephew actually found the church.
Okay.
And he went in there before any of us and then invited us to go. And it was awesome. It ended up being awesome. And I remember one day they were doing Bible study. And then a storm came, and a lot of the church members, they were coming from Pennsylvania because they actually migrated from Pennsylvania and opened that church. So they had canceled the Bible study because, you know, the storm, but then the storm didn't come. So then they reopened it, but then it was too late for everybody to get there on time. So I had a little debate, like, whether or not we were going to go. But I was like, no, you know what? We're going to go. So I got myself ready. I got them ready, and we went over. And it ended up just being me, the boys, the pastor, his wife, and their 3 kids. It just ended up being us. And he had said to me, he said, well, nobody else is coming, so what do you guys want to do? Y'all want to just go ahead and go home? Or do y'all want to still have Bible study, or we could just talk, or what? So I had decided to just talk because God had actually revealed something to me the day before.
Okay.
God had told me that I don't trust people. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know I don't trust nobody. But he said, no, but your distrust for people is so bad that you don't trust me either.
Ouch.
Right. So then I'm like, oh, snap. So I'm like, okay, God, so what do I do at this point? Because I don't know how to fix that. So I told him what God revealed to me, and we ended up having a discussion about it for about an hour and a half.
Okay.
So it was a blessing that storm didn't come because it was meant for us to be there to discuss this. And it helped a lot. I can say now, I trust him a whole lot more than I ever had. So
Praise God.
it's a lot.
Wow. Wow. So did things begin to change once you became stable in a church? Clearly, we both attend Living Waters, right? But once you became stable and you started attending church on a regular basis, did you notice things begin to change in yourself and in your boys?
Not right away, no. And even with starting Living Waters, I wasn't stable. That I still had that question of whether or not this is the place I'm supposed to be. And then I actually had got at a point, because with church hurt, my own issues of identity, I got to a point not too long ago where I was just going to not come back. I had made that decision. I'm like, this is not the place for us. I'm just going to leave. And then God gave me a dream. He gave me back a dream that he gave me as a teenager.
Okay.
And in a dream, I was in this house that was one of my sister's houses, but we were moving out. And it was like this huge house. And there was this little boy laying on the bed in a dream. I didn't know who he was when I first had the dream, but by the time he gave the dream back, I knew who he was.
Okay.
Because he was my nephew Noah.
Okay.
He had not been born when I got that dream the first time. there was also this young boy, this grown man that was standing in a mirror. He was looking in a mirror. Mm-hmm. And in a dream, when I first got it, I didn't know who he was either. Mm-hmm. But by then, I knew who he was because it was my nephew Suleiman, but he was grown. But when God gave me that dream, at first he was just a baby.
Wow.
Then the mirror he was looking in, though, it was not like a regular mirror where you see your reflection. We were literally looking into a hospital room.
Okay.
And in the hospital room, there was a man on the bed, and he had a wrap on his head.
Okay.
And there was a woman sitting beside him, and then like a little boy had came in through the room door, and the lady had bent down like this, like she was going to pick him up. And I had no clue who they were at first. Out of that whole dream, the only person that I knew at that moment was my sister. But once God gave the dream back to me, I was like, oh, so that's Noah, Suleiman, and three people that I saw in the mirror was Pastor Nikki, Pastor Quasi, and one of their sons.
Wow.
So when he showed me that,
it
was like he was telling me, this is where I want you right now. And I had the dream the first time when I was a teenager. And when he brought it back to me, I was so pumped. I'm like, I gotta tell him. Like, I knew you before you knew I knew you. So I had to tell him.
That's amazing. I think Nick kind of... She revealed that to me in a conversation once, but I didn't know the details of the dream. But hearing now more of it, I'm just like, that's amazing because of how God showed you the dream when you were little, but then he showed it again to you when you were an adult, right? That's amazing. Wow.
He was telling me, this is where I want you. This is where you belong. Wow. And because he gave that dream back to me, I was like, okay. I'm going to stay. And I think right after that, we had the Vacation Bible School. And I was in Pastor Quasi's class, and I'm like, hey, I know you.
Wow.
I've seen you before.
Wow, that's amazing. That was around 2017, 18? Around then? Wow, that's amazing. God is good. Wow. Okay, so, talk about the prophetic word or words that you have received about your boys being men of God.
Wow.
And how do you still believe that word despite challenges that you may face while raising them?
It's funny how I received that word because... You know, that place that I told you about that God took me to as a child, that I had utter peace. Throughout growing up, whenever it got really bad, I was able to have access to that place.
Okay.
So, this specific day, we were on our way to church. And there was so much going on. We were back at court. And I was, like, at the understanding that they were going to be taken away. So I've been crying the night before. I wasn't able to sleep. I'm in a car, and one of the members of the church picked us up. I'm in a car, and I'm trying to hold myself together. I'm in utter fear that I'm about to lose my sons. And I try to slip back into that place, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It was raining, and I was screaming, and I was crying.
Real quick, how did you slip back into that place? Was it like an imagination thing, or?
No, I can't even explain it.
Okay.
It was like a pool. Whenever I everything was everywhere, and I was so wound up, and I was so dragged down. I just would be in this place of utter peace.
Interesting. Okay.
But this time it was different. It wasn't peace there. It was chaotic. It was raining, and I was screaming, and I was crying. And then I set up like this, and, you know, I'm in a car, and I'm just, like, trying to keep myself together. So we all go to church, and we're in the sanctuary. And this specific day, Pastor had decided, you know, instead of telling people to come up to the altar, he decided he wanted everybody to come up to the altar. So I was walking down to the altar, and I'm still trying to keep myself together, and I'm everywhere. So I get up there, and I close my eyes, and then God shows me somebody come and put their hands on my back. And then they put their hand on my shoulder, and then they whisper in my ear, "Can I pray with you?" And
God showed you that.
He showed me that.
Okay. And then
a couple seconds later, one of the ministers come up. She put her hand on my back where God showed me, and her hand on my arm, and said, "Can I pray with you?"
Wow.
And then she said something that had me completely. She said, "When you were walking down the aisle, I could hear you screaming." So at this point,
Wow.
like, I'm trying to keep myself together, and then she started to speak to me about what God says. And, I was so tired of all the craziness, but I'm like, I don't have the right to say I'm tired, because God didn't say he was tired, and he endured so much for us.
Amen.
But then she said to me, God said he knows you're tired. He said she said he knows you're tired. But if you just hold on, and then she said, God said you are going to raise two great men of God. And she said some other stuff, but at this point I'm crying, and I'm just in worship, and like everybody else is sitting down and we're still up there. And I remember hearing Pastor say, let the Lord do what he's doing. Y'all focus on me, let the Lord do what he's doing over there. And holding on to that was not easy. It wasn't. Especially when the boys got up at age, and the things that I was afraid of began to hurt and the pain because of their situation. And because I'm a consistent person, a consistent parent, all the lashback came to me versus the other parents. So it was hard trying to cling on to what God said, that they're two great men of God. And right now, all I see is all the chaos, and I'm frustrated, and I'm trying to cling to it. But even with that, God put people in my life, Lucy being one of them, to speak to me, to remind me of his word. And times he himself reminded me of his word. And godly people at the church who I've reached out to helped me to cling on to it. Even in the studies that he chose for us, he chose for the boys not to study Joseph. The Joseph of many colors, the jacket of many colors. He had us study in that. And then he said to me, I gave Joseph that dream of where I wanted him to be before he went into the trials and tribulations, that he may hold on to that to carry him through what he had to go through until he got to that. So when he said that to me, he made me realize, I told you who they are. Now I need you to cling on to what I told you they are, to carry you through what you're going to have to do, go through, before they become who I say they are. Because not once did he tell Joseph, this is who you are. They're going to bow to you, but you ain't going to go do nothing, though. You're going to be good. No, he gave him the good because the bad was going to be hard, and he needed him to hold on to that faith of what he showed him to get him through the bad.
Absolutely.
And even though he gave me that, it's still not easy. I'm clinging on to it. Even family members who would say, oh, the boys are getting worse, and Stephenie is in denial. And Lucy, she would say, no, Stephenie is holding on to the faith of what God said her.
That's right.
She's holding on to who God said they are going to be. They are going to be two great men of God. And even in that, I had the understanding that he didn't say, if you do this, they're going to be. If you do that. No, he said, you are going to raise two great men of God.
That's right.
And one thing that I always known, God says what he says, how he say it purposely. He didn't lay it out to me like, if you do this, they're going, no.
That's right.
He said, you're going to raise two great men of God.
That's right. That's right.
And that is what's going to be. His word will not return to him void.
That's right.
It may not look like it right now, but that's why he keeps sending me to Hebrews 11:1 too. Because it don't look like it right now, but there are little things that comes out that shows me, though. Like even Andrew in his sleep, he was laying down sleeping, and then he started singing a gospel song in his sleep.
Wow.
Or before we got the place we have now, and we were going through so much, and I'm praying for a house, and then God gives Frederick a dream. He showed himself to Frederick, and I remember Frederick telling me, he said, Mommy, he's like, I couldn't see his face, but he had on like clean clothes, and he had like a crown that was pointy and a staff in his hand.
Wow.
And he said he was sitting there like this at first, and then he said, give them a house, give them a house. And then he said he picked up his staff and he hit it on the ground. And then like this, me, AJ, and Frederick was in a house.
Wow.
And even with that, like months passed and I'm losing hope. And he gives Frederick another dream.
Mm-hmm.
And Frederick comes to me and he's like, Mommy, I had a dream. We were walking down the street to our house and we stood in front of it and it was being worked on.
Okay.
So God was telling me, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Stay in faith.
Yeah.
So he would do little things to show me,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm talking to them. Oh, I am.
That's right.
Like even with them walking home from school, Andrew wants to walk a certain way, but Frederick wants to walk a different way. And usually Andrew gives in to Frederick and you know, he goes the way Frederick wants him to go.
Mm-hmm.
But one specific day, Frederick decides to go the way that Andrew wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew was surprised, but he was like, well, okay, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until later that Frederick revealed to me why, though.
Okay.
He said, Mommy, we was walking home, and something told me not to go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
They told me to go the way that Andrew wanted to go. And we found out later that an incident happened the way that they usually walk. So they're hearing
Absolutely.
the voice of God.
Absolutely.
And that right there is a big thing. That's the biggest thing, because that's like the beginning of relationship. They can hear him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he's showing me, you know, my word will be performed.
That's right.
They will be two great men of God. It may not look like it, and you got to go a little easy because they're still children.
That's right.
But they're hearing me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes back to his word. My sheep, they hear my voice, and a stranger they will not follow.
Right.
Not only are they hearing them, but the moment they hear them, they are obeying it too. So that's a big thing.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, how old are your boys?
Andrew is 13, Frederick is 12.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. When you were speaking about Joseph, I thought about the scripture, and I want to say it's Psalm 105, but I'm not sure. But it talks about Joseph, and it says, until the word came to pass, it tested him. And I remember hearing that scripture for the first time a few years ago. I didn't know that was even in the book of Psalms. And I said, oh my God, yes, that's what it is. Just thinking about words that have been spoken over me, right? That haven't come to pass yet. But I'm like, God, like, why is this so challenging? You know,
Yes.
like you said it, but it ain't happened. And as I'm waiting, it's challenging,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But when I read that verse, or when I heard it for the first time, I thought, there it is. Until it came to pass, the word tested him. So the word that you got for your boys initially, how long ago was that?
When I got that word, I believe Andrew was 3
Wow.
and Frederick was 2.
Wow.
So it was 10
Wow.
years ago.
Wow.
And Lord knows it's been a test. It is definitely testing.
Wow. And then God spoke again, I want to say through, I know Pastor Lawrence recently, that same word that God has your boys.
Before then, though.
And before
he
then.
spoke to me through my niece Ayana.
Okay.
He spoke to me through Lucy. He spoke to me through Pastor Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
And he also spoke to me through me. We were all sitting in my brother's house in his living room, and we had decided to do a group prayer. Mm-hmm. So we were praying, and it got to me, and God said to me, he said, they were my children before they were yours. Do not worry about them. I got them. Mm-hmm. But when he said this, he said that about all of the children. He said, they were mine before they were yours. Do not worry about them. And it's awesome because he's even given us a greater revelation. Like yesterday, Lucy and I were talking, and we were talking about what Pastor Lawrence said, how God said, and I will not forget your children. But in it, we also thought, we could feel in the spirit, Lucy could feel that God was also talking about my nieces and nephews, who are also my children. But then God gave me another revelation during the time we were talking. Since a young age, God had told me that he wanted me for leadership in a ministry with children. So I had dreams even as a child of me helping out so many children. It's mainly always about children. And there was even this dream where he would give me a list of children, and he would send me out to get them and bring them to him. And once I fulfilled that list, he would give me another list to go out to get other children. So when we were talking last night, and she was like, you know, God, she felt in the spirit that God was talking about the nieces and nephews too. But then God was like, no, I said, I will not forget your children. That includes the children that I am sending you out to get. So it expands greater than my boys and my nieces and nephews. It expands to whatever child that he purposed me to go out to get.
Wow. I love that. And I know you were talking about just identity issues growing up, right? And it's something that in this season of your life, you're still coming into who God has called you to be. How do you, as you're growing and maturing in the Lord, stand on that word of who he's called you to be in ministry while also learning more about your identity in him?
Oh, it is a whirlwind.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into part 1 of episode 27 featuring Stephenie Beatty, where the title is Raising My Nephews as a Single Mom. I want you to be sure to come back next Thursday, July 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify to see part 2 of this episode. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. If you haven't yet and you feel led to do so, go ahead and subscribe to the channel Breakthrough Conversations. I want you to also like this episode and share it with someone else that they may be encouraged and blessed. And leave a comment just letting us know something that stood out from this episode today. In the meantime, everyone, be blessed and have a wonderful day.